Okay, so I moved to Dublin about 2 years ago, and I noticed pretty immediately that all of the various public transportation systems are really compartmentalized, and not just in the way that they're owned by different companies and you couldn't get from one to the other with the same ticket, but that they totally seem to service different areas of the city. So like even the Lewis, which is one company, is like, well, we're just not going to connect them for any reason. And it seemed to me indicative of the way that people in Dublin actually thought about the space around them. So I'll give you an example. I took a taxi one day, and I was like, could you take me to the corner of South Circular Road and Denora Avenue, which is undisputably a location. And the taxi driver was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And so I was like, well, I don't really know how I could break this down for you any further, because in my mind, I just think about where I am based on streets and what street's coming up and what street's behind me, and I'm thinking about the corners, and I'm not really paying too much attention to the landmarks around me. I'm just looking at the street signs and how they change 50 times. And in his mind, he's obviously thinking about like the landmarks and visually where he is in space and how he gets to it, like up, which totally doesn't mean north. And so like we had totally different points of view on how to get to the same exact place. And we were both right. I was more right. But we both had to talk for a long time about like a simple corner. So I'm from New Orleans. That's where I grew up. And the main public transportation was a streetcar. And it's really more for quaintness sake. And it just went in like a straight line, and it went up St. Charles Avenue, which had a bunch of mansions and oak trees, and it was really beautiful. But I didn't really use it. It was only for tourists. The only time I ever used it was during Mardi Gras because there was no parking. But that was the way I got used to how trains worked, even though it was barely a train, that I would just stand still and it would come to me and it would just take me a little further down the same street that I was on. So then I moved to New York City, and I had to learn how to use a real public transportation system. So one of the very first times I used it, I was on the Upper West Side, and I had to visit a friend in the East Village. So I had to transfer trains in Times Square. So I got to the station in Times Square, and I just sort of stood there. I was in college, so I thought I was the center of the universe. And so I was like, well, the other train's going to come to exactly where I'm standing and take me where I need to go. But of course, I had to walk from one location to another to get the next train to take me where I needed to go. And there were signs everywhere that said that, but I didn't even look at them. They didn't occur to me because I was so used to the streetcar and the way that the streetcar operated. And so it took me like several trains to go by for me to realize that I actually had to move and be a person. So fast forward a couple years, and I moved to Brooklyn, and I moved to Greenpoint, which is the very top. And one of the first nights we were there, my friend and I were like, well, let's just get on a bus and let's just go and explore Brooklyn. And it was, by the way, it was midnight on a Tuesday. And so we got on the bus, and of course, like the bus stops on the map didn't mean anything to us, and the bus map didn't have any like bars on it. So we were like, well, maybe we'll just look out the window and see when like something cool happens, and we'll get out there. And so that didn't happen. So we just got off the bus, and we were in East Williamsburg, which is the Hasidic Jewish neighborhood. And I mean, it's like 100% Hasidic Jewish. Like there is not a Gentile to be found anywhere. And they were having this like really weird big festival. And so like everyone was out on the streets, even the little kids, and it was like pitch black. There weren't that many streetlights. And all this traditional music was coming out the windows of these high-rise buildings. And it was totally weird, and like no one was looking at us at all, so we were just sort of wandering around like, what's going on? And then we finally figured out our way back. But we never would have found that if we weren't lost. And being lost is a really good route to discovery, and it sticks more than if the discovery is handed to you. And so in that way, I think it's more valuable. And so the way that we navigate a space is based a lot more on our point of view than the way that it's actually laid out for us. So in my conversation with the taxi driver, with all those street signs and maps, that didn't mean as much to me as like my own expectations. That's how I proceeded. And so how can we use this as web designers? Well, we can use it by injecting a lot more creativity into our design instead of making everything a template. It means we can focus on making the user journey really, really interesting instead of making it really high-walled. And so we can't design for everyone. So this is a map with just everything on it. And of course, that doesn't make any sense, and you can't read it. So because we can't design for everyone, we really need to cater to the lost, because people are definitely going to be lost because you can't design for everyone. And so that really means that we need to focus more on creativity and less on functionality. And we need to create really interesting and compelling content, so the space that you're creating online is a great place to be lost in. That's the last slide. Thanks.